Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I'm joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble. He and I are going to discuss a topic, and I'd like to start off by seeing if Kevin has any questions or comments about recent content.
Well, I think we've got a good topic today, so don't want to delay too long, but wanted to follow up on a couple of your recent videos and kind of check in on the status of those. First, I think a video that people should really check out if they haven't already is your Singlebucker video. And I won't go too far into the details on that one, but a really cool project with really great results. And I wanted to kind of see what your thoughts are on that and like where you take it from here, because I know you had some thoughts in putting it together, and there was some good discussion in the comments about some different approaches. So what's next for the Singlebucker?
Well, somebody did add a really good comment, and it was like, well, if you go a little bit thinner wire, I could get more winds on it. The end result is that I created kind of a new concept for how to make a pickup. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that because I'd like for you to watch the video. I think that the final result is totally usable. I am currently using it in a guitar. I think that, though, I would like to experiment with getting more winds onto it to see if I can change some of the tonal characteristics. It is a very bright and present pickup, and I think that adding maybe 1,000 more winds to it would cut a little bit of that brightness and maybe bring a little bit more mid-range. Right now, it's real heavy on, it's scooped. It's got a very scooped mid-range presence to it, which is awesome in its own way. But my idea is I'm probably going to make 2 or 3 more prototypes and experiment with putting those into guitars, and then maybe film each prototype, same instrument, same strings, same amp setup, everything, and just kind of get a sense of it. As of the moment, I am probably not going to start producing those until after, it will probably be closer to, midwinter. I will probably get into that, because right now I'm really focused on tracking. Where I'm at with that.
Yep. Yeah. Again, encourage everyone to check out that video. It's a great concept, breaking some new sonic ground. So I'm glad to hear there's going to be more to come on that. And then also another recent video you had was the Strat breakdown, where that was going to be taken apart and finished and kind of turned into a proper guitar visually. So what's the status of that?
It is done. I finished it about 2 weeks ago. It has become my primary Strat out in the shop. I feel like if I bring it here into the studio, then I won't touch any of these, so I really kind of want to keep it segregated. It's a great all-purpose guitar for doing demos and illustrating concepts, so I think I want to leave it in that space, but I really enjoy playing it. But yeah, it's a completed guitar, and on my Instagram account, if you go there and scroll back through the posts, there is a picture of it right next to the Acoustic Control Core 117. That will kind of be one of my primary setups out there. Yep, it's
Great.
all done.
Yeah.
Turned out beautiful.
Yep. Looking forward to seeing that in some future videos. And that's the one that has your hand wound pickups in it as well, right?
In the neck, in the bridge positions, in the middle position, and this is kind of odd for a Strat, but I've got a Seymour Duncan single coil sized humbucker in the middle position, and there will be a video coming where I illustrate the utility of using very powerful tone controls to how powerful tone controls can be on a guitar. Not your standard, just treble roll-offs and things like that, but you can do other passive configurations that will really, give your guitar more utility on stage and in the studio.
Awesome. Good stuff to
All
come.
coming. But I guess now we're here for the big topic. There is a band in American history that I think could be the most important band in American rock history. If you want to go, let's say it's post 1970, okay? Because I don't want to I don't want people arguing about Buddy Holly or Elvis or all the
Beach
great
Boys.
blues. Yeah, all the great blues artists of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way through history. But I would say from 1970 on, there is one band that really stands out and could be one of the most significant, both for trend setting, for conceptual ideas, for sonics, and just for writing incredibly solid pop songs that are just like part of our landscape. There's no escaping this band if you are into popular music. And that band would be Devo. And I think that Devo is often looked at as some sort of joke, or they're a novelty act, or they're so niche that, nobody likes to kind of like include them in the conversation. And I think that that's why we're going to have this conversation. I think they deserve their own conversation, and I think that they stand apart, but in a very significant way, rather than in a way where they should be overlooked or discarded or, discounted as some sort of novelty act. And I should maybe first I want to talk about my introduction to Devo. I remember the Nostalgia Shop in our hometown, Columbia, Missouri. And I don't know if your parents were brave enough to take you in there when you were, my age, but my dad didn't care. He took me in there, and there was all sorts of paraphernalia and weird stuff in there. But there was always Devo stuff. From 1978 on, it was like there were Devo posters, Devo pins, Devo flower pot energy domes, and all this stuff was in that store. And then I heard Whip It. That was kind of their first song that, people like us.
Everything.
Yeah, people like us in the middle of mid-Missouri in 1980, that was a song we would hear. There was nothing else we weren't going to hear Mongoloid or, we are, Are We Not Men and all that stuff. That was too underground for, a couple of 8-year-old or a 9-year-old in your case, kids to have access to. But Whip It came, and then
somebody brought that 45 in and played it on the record player in the classroom in elementary school. That's when I first heard it. So that saturated everything.
Yeah, it cut through it all. And then Devo was around from that point on. It was all, and then Devo kind of like disappeared, but probably by the time we were in the middle of high school, the Devo thing was kind of, at least from our Midwestern, Columbia, Missouri perspective, Devo was it was a huge part of pop culture for 5 years, and then it was gone.
Then the commercial part ended,
their commercial heyday ended. Over the past 5 years, though, I've kind of started revisiting Devo, and it was kind of, it was a song called Gates of Steel, and it really, I was kind of like, wow, I should listen to some Devo. So I start going through YouTube, as always, and it's like, I'll find some Devo, and I had Devo stuff, in my collection, but I wanted to find some stuff I'd never heard before. I heard Gates of Steel, and I was just like, okay, this is serious music. I mean, this is just great. Top to bottom, there's no equivocation. It is just an amazing song, and I started finding more and more of their songs fit that mold as well, where it was like, this is great stuff, and I wish that I had really delved into it when I was young, because I think it would have changed some of my musical trajectories. It would have saved me maybe from the, some of the more, Bachman Turner overdrive kind of focus that some of my listening had in my youth, because we were listening to KFMZ, we were listening to very white bread stations.
Rock radio,
Yeah, and so Gates of Steel really intrigued me, and then I was like, I want to learn more about these people. So I started researching Devo, and I was just like, oh my goodness. These people, they made movies with Neil Young. They did all sorts of, they had Bowie interested in them. There were so many of the big players and trendsetters of the time were very intrigued with Devo, because Devo was doing something truly new. And where that truly new comes in is the idea, we were talking about this before we started filming. There's a concept band and then a band based upon their own philosophy that they've created. And I think that's what makes Devo unique, is that they actually created an entire philosophy, which I'm going to go to here in a moment. But I want to talk about concept. A concept band, when I say that, I mean something like Kiss. I mean something like more contemporary, or it's not even that contemporary, but like a Slipknot or Gwar or whatever, where you put on makeup and you've got like a theme or whatever it is. That's a concept. But Devo went way further than that. And I want to go ahead and do this little thumbnail history and then let you jump in with your thoughts of this. Gerald, Casale, and Mark Mothersbaugh were both students at Kent State University in 1970 when the shootings occurred on campus. I'm not going to go into all of their details of their socio-political lives up to that point, but they both were polarized by that moment. They had two dear friends, were two of the people who were killed that day.
Mhm.
Gerald really goes into detail in an oral history where he talks about how the locals and the local media spun it so they, with the first headline that anybody ever read in Kent, Ohio, was that the students had killed National Guardsmen. So there was all this spinning, and they saw that reality was being twisted and that authority had overstepped all boundaries of decency. And they're like, well, our society is devolving. Everything is turning to garbage. America is Ronald McDonald. It is not anything legitimate. So they decided to do performance art, be it music, visuals, video, pioneering an entire genre based around this idea of devolution. And that's where Devo came from. It came from one of the most traumatic events in America, in recent American history. This is only 54 years ago that this happened. And they have run with that ever since, and they never deviated from it. They've always maintained we are going backwards. We are using satire. We are using popular culture. We are using philosophy. We are using social critique. We are using capital. It's all a condemnation of capitalism ultimately. Yep. And for all of that to be wrapped into one thing, I can't think of another band that has that much of a significant intellectual property under their belt than what they have. And I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, that's a lot of good framing and setup for them. And to some extent, I think that characteristic is a little more of a defining characteristic of American rock, or at least some of it. Statement, protest, speaking against authority. It's not that didn't exist. I mean, you've got Sex Pistols and everything else, and MC5 and so forth. But whether it's Sly and the Family Stone or any of the bands we've already mentioned, there's a little bit more of that in the DNA, perhaps, of American music. But Devo is completely embodies that. They don't just step into that. They just don't just use it as a front. It really is inseparable from their identity. And what you mentioned about sort of using the tools of the authoritarian state to kind of respond to it. I saw something about Casale talking about sort of part of the Kent State outcome was realizing, change wouldn't come through protest. It would come through subversion. Mm-hmm. And so using basically the same mechanism that is used to sell people commercially things they don't want to buy would be something to appropriate to get this message out. But a fundamentally subversive message, could there be any more subversive message in the United States than devolution? The United States being probably the greatest embodiment of the idea of perpetual progress, perpetual growth, yes, perpetual optimism, and every new advancement is a positive, and there's nothing but good things ahead, and we're always ahead of where we were before. I can't think of any other philosophy that would be more subversive than to say, no, it's not the case. Yeah, not even that it's possible, but that is what is happening, and that is what is going to continue happening. And so it's, yeah, when you start from a position like that, they've already sort of staked out territory that is separating themselves from everything else. And another good quote I heard, and I'll pivot this back to you in a second, but another good quote I heard from Casale was quoted somewhere else was, "It's no secret that everyone can play better and sing better than Devo, but no one could think better than Devo." Yeah. And that is staking a claim to something that puts them, I think, on a different metric maybe than what we would consider the other great American bands, whether it's, Cheap Trick, Steely Dan, Metallica, Parliament Funkadelic, the best of the grunge bands. This is a different angle. This is a different approach, and it's a very uncompromising approach. And so that really sets them on a track where they are singular in American rock history, I would say.
Absolutely, and I would argue against their own. They are very self-deprecating when they talk about their actual art. They consider it low art from where they sit, but these guys could play. I mean, there's no question. I mean, you can go and find any performance clip from their heyday, and they are playing really close to as well as they do on the record, if not exceeding the record in energy and presentation and their arrangement choices. I mean, they can play. There's no question that Devo, and they were pioneers sonically in a lot of ways. I mean, you had I think one of the Bobs was playing like a plank guitar. It was just a 2x4 with a pickup on it. I forget who the maker was of that particular instrument. They brought unconventional body shapes in. Gerald had that Spud bass, which was basically like a Steinberger prototype almost. They also disassembled one of the two mini Moogs that they had, and those were hard to come by back then. And Mark was one of the first in America to really be using a mini Moog constantly. And there's a whole history of him talking about how he acquired that instrument and how he appropriated it, he circuit bent it, and then his brother also disassembled the other one and turned it into a drum machine. So, I mean, they were innovators and deconstructionists of music, and can't get no satisfaction. Their cover of that, the idea that you turn an iconic rock song into a series of sequencer parts is, something that is now, that's an industry standard and has been for decades. But Devo was the first band to really lean into all of those ideas of electronic music being a legitimate means of delivery to an audience. As you see through their early career history, they go from, two guitars and a bass and a keyboard to more and more. It like gets down to one guitar and everybody else is on some sort of noise-making machine. Yet it is all still music. Yet it is all still real parts. And I think that their contribution to sonics and approach to songwriting as kind of a component driven, like here's a component, here's another component, then we put them together, and then making it into a whole where that sum is actually greater than the parts, And I think that's something that just can't, how influential that was.
Absolutely. They're absolutely sonic pioneers. They're right there at the cusp of punk and new wave, and pop and rock. I mean, you talk about Gates of Steel, on one album, you've got Whip It and you've got Freedom of Choice and you've got Gates of Steel. I mean, they're doing it all. They're doing, driving rock. They're doing, quirky, sort of new wave. They're doing something with more of a punk edge to it. But sonic pioneers, philosophical diehards, and just the subversion of their message. I mean, if you look at I think of a song like Freedom of Choice, from that same album. It's anthemic, it's catchy, it's got the hook, it's superficially tying into this very sort of American idea, this freedom of choice, and it's a great example to me of how self-aware they were, because that song starts off. It's all about use your freedom of choice. You have freedom of choice, and then as the song progresses, they drop in, oh, wait a minute, freedom from choice is what you actually want. And so they take the time setting you up with the sort of rah, sort of American, go America kind of philosophy. And then they start weaving in slowly, wait a minute, are we being made fun of, the listener? Are we being, and our ideas and our enthusiasm, are we suddenly, is the camera turning and suddenly we're the subject and we're the joke? And to me, that was another sort of frontier that they crossed that is kind of a no-no with any type of popular group. Is they weren't just satirizing America. They weren't just looking at the concept of devolution. They were looking back at the listener, and they were challenging the listener. Yes. And they were they were using the tools of music to get us wrapped up in the music, but then we were kind of subject to the attack of the lyrics as well. And so that was going to be commercially self-destructive. But when they follow up Whip It and, the big commercial opportunity that waited for them with something like Through Being Cool, which is basically a rejection saying, we're not going to do that. We've got this opportunity to be cool and we're not going to take it. And we're, we're making fun of that. We're sticking to our guns. It's really something to see the way they pioneered things sonically, but at the same time stuck to their philosophy when they could have taken that into they could have played the game
Sure.
and succeeded at it. But their philosophy was where all of this came from. Like you said, this originated from something, intellectual. It didn't originate from just, goofing off or killing time or,
Yeah.
drinking beer and making noise.
Yeah,
So,
it was all very important to them. And it still is. I mean, they still, they still have their hands around that candle and they keep going for sure. And I think that I'd like to kind of conclude, and I think we'll come back to Devo at some point. I think that it's a very rich territory to talk about because of the cultural significance of it. And but they were always DIY. They pioneered music videos and long form concept movies long before a lot of other people even picked up on the fact. They always thought that the visual was equal to the music, and that just completely before MTV, before YouTube, before all these things. I mean, now everything is visual, and the music has to have some sort of visual. And they understood that long before, they understood that 50 years ago. And
they were right there, ready and waiting with that concept when MTV, took off, and
exactly, they had it all in hand.
Yeah,
had it all in hand, and it was huge. And like I said, I think that the fact that they came up with their own idea, their own philosophy, their own instruments, their own means of performance, their own visual identity. All of it was DIY. They would go to janitorial supply companies and get cheap, tear away, hazmat suits. And they went to toy stores to get the helmets. And the fact that they stitched it all together themselves, and to build an empire of visuals and sonics is kind of unmatched. I mean, and that's why I consider them one of the most important bands from 70 onwards. I can't think of another band who's still, they're still around. That's the other part. They do still perform, and they're still pretty good. I'm not going to say they're as good as their heyday, but they can still pull it off.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Completely authentic. It's authenticity from start to finish. And that's what holds up over time. That's what stands the test of time. And that's why I think we're talking about them here today. It's not because of a, commercial renaissance or anything like that. It's because the integrity of their ideas was constant.
It's inspirational. There's nothing else I can say. It really inspires me whenever touch on Devo, and I wanted to talk about them, and just kind of, now I want all of you who have watched this to get in the comments. Do you have an opinion on Devo? Are you a Devo fan, a Devo neophyte? Will you now go check out Devo and go, oh, maybe they're not some sort of joke band, maybe there's something there that I should check out? And I would hope so. Well, anyway, thank you so much,
Angry
Kevin.
Bachman Turner Overdrive fans. We're gonna get away.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you love Randy Bachman, then you can tear me a new one in the comments. I got nothing against him. He's a good songwriter.
Yes.
But anyway, all right. If you've watched the video to this point, please like and subscribe. Comments, keep them coming, and likes and shares are huge. Channel is doing very well. I'm very pleased with the direction we are headed. Let's keep it going. And we'll see you next time with another conversation. Take care.